In 1848, Marx and Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto, which then paved the way to very oppressive regimes in Eastern Europe. They created the manifesto not out of nowhere, but because they observed that industrialization has led to big disparity between the working class and the capitalist class. Then the 20th century comes, and we're even happier. People fly around, nuclear energy, electronics, internet, mobile phones, and so on. But then we have to remember also that the Soviet Union was created in 1917. The First World War, started by Germany, was an attempt to get the resources that Britain and France, because of their colonies they had, while Germany did not have, and so on. So when we start thinking about this, we realize that today we are experiencing the fourth industrial revolution. And if we think that this industrial revolution will happen without any costs, without any impact on societies around the world, on the environment, then I think that history is telling us otherwise. Unless we are prepared, unless we think how we can preempt these unpleasant deviations, wars, social unrest, environmental degradation, unless we think now about this, we will be surprised a few years later, sometimes possibly with irreversible consequences. So that's why today we are, I think, at a particularly important moment in time. We have two big problems. We have to learn how to do business in a different way than what we have been doing in the past, and I'll talk about this a bit more. But the second thing we have to think, which is more difficult, is how to anticipate and how to react to things that we have not even seen yet. And that's even more challenging. Here is an example that Peter was referring. It turns out that according to the National Public Radio Survey that was done a couple of years ago, in 29 states in the United States, out of the 50 states, in 29 states, the most popular profession is truck driving. So what do you think it will be happening to these people in the next few years when our alumni are working on companies that deliver autonomous vehicles and will make a lot of these people redundant? So we have to think about these impacts because the future will be the way that we design it. There is a very good book, many of you probably have read, Life 3.0 by Max Tegmark. He's a professor of mathematics at MIT. And it's about artificial intelligence. And basically in that book, he describes a lot of important things, but he says, if we sit back and we watch how this whole revolution unravels, we may end up in a situation that is unpleasant and detrimental, not only to the environment, not only to society, but even to our freedom. So we have to think ahead. But the good news, he's optimistic because he said, we are the ones that will design the future. If we think now and not wait to react to all this. So when we think about technological progress and economic growth, we have to think about the impact also that it has on society and environment. The second thing that I want to talk about, and I have been talking about these things at least for the last 5 years, when I introduced in our conversations business as a force for good, is the dialectics between business and society, the tension between business and society. So earlier today, Helen mentioned how she witnessed the Chinese transformation. From 1980 until today, more than 850 billion people have been lifted out of poverty in China. It's a miracle. And this miracle is created by business. At the end of the day, there is no other way to lift people out of poverty than business creation and economic growth. Economic growth is driven by business creation. And in the world, more than 1.3 billion people have been lifted out of poverty. Unfortunately, this is not the whole story. But it is a very important story in the whole narrative. Because sometimes when we jump directly, let's just do social impact, social enterprise, and so on, we forget that at the core, 99% of the value that is created out there is created by business that is trying to focus to produce goods and so on. However, the issue is that despite all these miracles that are created around the world, societies somehow do not trust business. Tension is increasing. Earlier just Jit showed you some of the some slides here showing that the attitude towards business and business schools, like bulldoze all business schools and so on. In fact, if you look at standard barometers of trust, look at the middle one, 60% of the general public believes that CEOs are driven more by greed than attempt to solve societal problems. At the same time, when people are asked the question, who do you think will solve these problems, business or governments? 76% say business. So there is distrust in CEOs, but at the same time, it seems that governments are even in worse situation than that. So today, I think that the time is different because business has a much more important role to play than ever before. Why is this lack of trust? We know trust is dissipating because in the process of managing our companies, of executing, we create a lot of unintended consequences. Sometimes not necessarily unintended. Sometimes the corporate scandals that we have seen, people have known what they're doing. But sometimes it's environmental degradation that we're not really aware of, or market failures. So what should we do today? I think that today we have to start changing norms. And I've been saying this for at least 2 years now. It is difficult. It is very difficult to change norms, but I don't see any other way. We have tried, I would say for the last 56 years, the economics profession has been thinking, if there is a market failure, if there is an externality, what do you do? Well, you impose taxes, you have subsidies, you have regulation and all these things. But it is not sufficient because you cannot regulate everything. And sometimes if you impose taxation but the norms are not changed, then companies, as we have seen so many times, find a way to evade these taxes. They go to another jurisdiction, they do something else, don't repatriate their profits and so on. So we need to think about new norms. New norms that basically say that in the process of value creation for the company, you have to think, what do we create for society and for the environment? Now, is it possible to change this? Yes, it is, as long as we understand that we live in imagined reality. This is a book by Yuval Harari that I'm sure half of the audience has read. The chapter that really struck me in a very important way is the chapter on imagined realities. You can read this quote, ever since the cognitive revolution, sapiens have been living in a dual reality on the one hand, the objective reality of rivers, trees, and lions, and on the other hand, the imagined reality of gods, nations, and corporations. As time went by, the imagined reality became ever more powerful, so that today, the very survival of rivers, trees, and lions depends on the grace of imagined realities, such as the United States and Google. Norms change. We can change this imagined reality. It is a social construct. Norms change because we want them to change. 40 years ago, women here in Switzerland could not vote. 50 years ago, you come to Insead, or 52 years ago, there are only men in the classroom. Because these were the norms at the time. Not everybody liked them, but these were the norms. So today, we look at this and we think, how could they even agree to something like this? And I can tell you, 20, 30 years from now, the next generation will look back and say, how can they do business like this? We heard earlier from Andre, the massive degradation in the environment and the loss of biomass and so on. And this is getting worse. You know that 60% of the biomass has been lost in the last 40 years. Now, what do we need? We need today to design a new social contract. The old social contract was a concept designed or introduced into the philosophical and political theory by Thomas Hobbes and then later on by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, where we're asking the question, how do we arrange the relationship between citizens and government so that we give away part of our freedom to the government, but they do not abuse it? So it's a social contract. The government provides us with some services. We give away part of our freedom. Today, many of the large corporations are bigger and more powerful than many countries in the world. Today, they affect us, our lives, society, the environment, much more than any government. So the new social contract has to include business. And when we think about changing norms and changing the way that our mindset, this is actually the objective of what we're doing at Insead with the Hoffman Institute. I would say, I'll be a bit contrarian, controversial. Responsible leaders, that's a nice thing to have, but it's not enough. It's like, the myth of Sisyphus, where you're pushing up the rock, the hill, then the responsible leader is fired, and then you have to develop the new one. It's actually what we need to do, and that's what we try to do at Insead. You need everybody to change their mindset. Not just the leaders, but all the managers, everybody in the organization, because most of the innovation in this area is not coming from the leader. Most of the innovation is coming actually from people who are in middle management and so on. So that's why I think that we need to work harder. Now, the good news is that change is coming. I want to assure all of you that Insead is not creating a radical new theory of the world. Actually, we're doing something very simple. We look where the world is heading. We see that there is more and more dissatisfaction with the way that we have been working in the past. We see that the world is moving in that direction, and we're only trying to pull this together, create a framework to understand all these processes so that other companies can accelerate their path as well. Here are examples, but again, there's so many examples in this area that we can spend 2 hours just discussing those. Essilor is a glasses company, and when one of our alumnus, Hubert Senier, was the CEO, they decided that they want to make sure that people around the world have proper vision, eyeglasses. So Jasjit again was talking about companies like this earlier. They argue that good vision is a human right, and at the same time, 2.5 billion people in the world have untreated poor vision. Of these 2.5 billion people, 692 million are classified as blind, even though the only thing that they need are glasses. So they created a framework, a scheme, how to go and test in rural areas what kind of glasses people need, created a way to produce cheap glasses and distribute them. Then there is, of course, the story of Novozymes, which I think it is, I don't have time to go over the story, but what is interesting about Novozymes, and given that we had a session on governance and sustainability, it's an amazing way to create the right incentives for the CEO. Because the CEO is compensated on financial results, but at the same time, against the formula, there is a coefficient in front of the formula from 0 to 1, depending on how well he has achieved the sustainability objectives set in the beginning of the year. And then Novozymes is one of the most sustainable companies in the world. Change is coming. Here is also another example of our alumni from 2009 who started the company Win Now, basically trying to deal with all the kitchen waste, the food that is wasted in the hospitality industry. $100 billion worth of food is just thrown away. They're trying to create a model to actually deal with this waste. More importantly than these companies that we see changing the way that the models that they operate with, is the new generation. I mean, we see them at Insead, and today you'll see some of those here from recent classes in Insead, how they make change. You know, especially in Europe, I think everybody knows Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old girl who started a few years back the strike for climate. Because she said, I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic because the house is on fire. And at the end of May, more than 1 million people in 1,000 locations, more than 1,000 locations around the world, went on strike. Students, high school children. They will think in a very different way than us. And those of you who have kids in that generation, probably you experience this. I certainly experienced this with my children. So change is coming because mindsets are now different, and because I think that some companies are indeed going in the right direction. So what are we doing? How is Insead responding? Let's start with our mission. I started using business as a force for good because I had to go back initially as a newly appointed dean to think, what is really Insead? Why are we here? Why do we exist, given that we are not part of a university, not a for-profit organization, and so on? So our mission is that we bring together people, cultures, and ideas to develop responsible leaders who transform business and society. And the way that then we decided, we did a lot of things in the last 6 years, but we decided that change is coming, but it is slow. We need to accelerate the impact that the school is having. We have a unique opportunity. We have a unique opportunity because we have an audience that is willing to listen. 1,000 students every year come to Insead. And at the same time, we have a unique opportunity because they go to 170 countries around the world. This challenge is global, and we need to address it through our network. So we started the campaign for Insead. We call it A Force for Good. Why did we start this campaign? First, we wanted to raise awareness. We wanted to make sure that everybody understands why we need this fundraising. We deliver on our mission. Without fundraising, we will deliver on our mission, but we'll deliver with much less impact and much lower speed. Wanted to change culture, wanted to accelerate change. So our campaign has 3 V's. So we decided, let's try to organize all our objectives into this simple framework: values, vision, and ventures. Our values are basically tolerance, inclusion, diversity. In our values, we think about impact not just in the business, but beyond business and in the society. Our values include the idea that education has to be global. So actually the lifelong learning platform, this global learning community that we want to create, is part of our values. We don't want to be a national, we have never been a national business school. We don't want to shrink and close down now. The Hoffman Institute for Business and Society was created in order to promote our values of having impact not only in business but also on society and the environment. Right now we have a research fund that supports 7 different research streams: ethics, gender balance, humanitarian operations, social impact, sustainability, tech for good, and study of wealth inequality. But again, the important thing of the Institute is not just to do more research. Research is important, knowledge creation is important. The idea is to change mindsets, to change awareness. You can think about all this in the framework of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Now they have become a very important part of the conversation at Insead. I love this framework because behind the 17 goals, I assume that everybody knows these goals, right? Because I found recently that many of my colleagues actually when I say SDG said, what is SDG? So I'm sure you know the 17 goals. Now I'll test you on these 169 targets later on to make sure that you know this as well. But they are important because they create a conversation how we can move in the right direction. At the same time, I want us to be aware that this should not become the next altar to which we just go and pray without thinking. Because if you look at the 17 SDGs, there are a lot of tensions in between the SDGs. Goal 8 and 9, growth and industrialization, innovation, infrastructure, and so on. Actually, economic growth is what created environmental degradation. Infrastructure, building infrastructure hurts natural habitats. You know, they go against number 15. And you can tell stories about the rainforest, about the Indonesia, and so on. So we have to think really carefully, how do we meet these goals so that we reduce this tension and growth is not as damaging on the environment as it has been in the past. But awareness is very important. Awareness is very important because it is the first step to doing something. I love the SDGs because before that we're talking about sustainability. Just sustainability. And sustainability is just such a big concept that it's very difficult to operationalize it, to do something with it. And this are doing it. In his acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize last year, William Nordhaus, he received Nobel Prize for economics, for his work actually on climate. He is considered to be the father of environmental economics with his papers in the 70s and the 80s. And he wrote at the end, in the summary, we have to do 4 things in order to make a difference on climate change. The first one is knowledge, because we really don't know what is happening out there, and we don't know what kind of models we need to build. Second is proper price on carbon. It's impossible to change where we're heading without carbon taxes and carbon pricing. Number 3 is coordinated action because it's a global issue, not a national issue. And number 4 is new technology. But the first thing, the reason I'm saying all this is because the first thing is knowledge. Without awareness, you cannot go very far. You cannot convince people to change. You cannot change mindsets, and you cannot change business models. So I think that this is very important. So how do we build awareness? It's the first stepping stone to actually achieving these goals. Here is one example. In the strategy course, which is now in P1, at the end of the course, we have 1 day which we have left for the students to solve a real life case from a company that has strategic issues. And the company last year was Unjani Clinics. It's an organization in South Africa where they try to provide healthcare to 15 million people who have no access to healthcare. So they came to us and they said, we have 50 clinics now, but to meet our objectives, we need 1,000. So we have to scale up. And now we rely a lot on donors. We want to be sustainable from a financial point of view. So pretty big problems. Our students love big problems. So they came, they worked for 1 day, and they came up with some proposal. They're winners, of course. Then we discussed this same case in the operations class, and then in the marketing class, how you brand these clinics. And during the elective period, there was an elective on this, with the students, 20 of the students flying to Johannesburg and helping the nurses understand how to implement this strategic plan. So teaching them and so on. Super excited. Now, will Unjani Clinics be successful? I don't know. And in fact, the SDG bootcamp that Catel mentioned earlier today, this bootcamp is also started not because necessarily the projects will have an impact. Some of them will not. But because we want to raise awareness. Once students start working on SDGs, they will know what SDGs are. They know what the problems are. So tomorrow when they go to McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, or any other company, then they will have a different mindset. This is at least our hope. Then our values are also about diversity, so we increase the scholarship budget in order to get more and different students, to have diversity in the classroom. Thank you to all of you who have been supporting our students with scholarships. And here in Switzerland, again, I have to have a shout out to Brigitte for creating this movement to create a scholarship for a Swiss student. Thank you very much. But we're very far from where we want to be. We want to increase the amount that we give to students, and we want to increase the overall budget. So these are the values. We want to have a diverse class. We want people to think about the impact on society. What is our vision? Our vision is basically academic excellence. We cannot pretend, we cannot claim to be a leading business school in the world if we are not creating new knowledge, if we're not at the frontier of knowledge creation. And the good news is that we have a lot of our people are really very productive and very innovative. You know Chen Kim and renewal board. Our Dean of Faculty, Laurence Capron, received 2 years ago the most prestigious prize in management sciences, named after Suman Ghoshal. And then there are 5 case awards, and actually Felipe Montero, who was here earlier today, and Jasjid as well, are some of the recipients. But this is very important. What is the school like 10, 20 years from now? What is our vision? Academic excellence must be there. The next thing is we need to change our campus. So here is our campus renewal project. To orient you, you can see the library, you can see the calendar area. The forest building is where the new restaurant will be. We'll demolish the, actually there is a parking lot there. The current restaurant will be demolished together with everything that goes there in the back, and we'll build a new calendar area there. So that all the teaching spaces are put together. The students don't have to run from BCGLP to the other side of the campus and so on. And there are breakout rooms and so on. But the other reason that we're doing this project is because we want to create the right spaces for the new ways in which we teach. And yet another reason is we want to have a sustainable campus. Right now, from an energy efficiency point of view, Fontainebleau campus is really, really bad. It's probably the worst in France in terms of energy efficiency. So we have to change this. We will increase the density of forest on campus, and we'll use materials that are consistent with the forest around us. You know, more wood and steel and so on. We want to create a campus that is integrated with nature. So when people come to Fontainebleau, they feel both nature and they feel the academic institution. And that, I think, that is a great project for the next few years. And what are our ventures? Well, Insead is a very entrepreneurial school. And nobody has done what we have done. You know, creating a campus 6,000 miles away from the main campus, growing it to become a fully fledged business school. Singapore today can separate and can become still, in terms of faculty size, one of the top 15 schools in the world in terms of number of faculty. But the 2 campuses are fully integrated. We create a campus in Abu Dhabi, and now we have a new venture, and that is in San Francisco. These ventures, why are we doing this? Why do I create more work for Peter? I like it. At the same time, you know, we are about impact. It's very difficult sometimes to create impact with the facilities that you have. We saw a huge opportunity in San Francisco, as he explained, connecting with the ecosystem, connecting with the tech industry, and so on. So what are we trying to achieve with our campaign? Raise 250 million euros. We're already at 169 million. The campaign runs until 2023. More importantly for me is the participation rate. Because fundraising is about the long-term success of the school. It's not about these 250 million euros. It's about ensuring that the community stands behind Insead, that we are doing this project together. And together, In fact, we have changed the culture of giving. We have created, I think, we're not there yet, but we have created the sense of community. And I think that these forums helped tremendously. We're growing them, we're doing them in various continents. And you can see the results. These fundraising results, which are starting, if somebody had told me when I started in 2013 that we'll be raising 30, 40, 50 million euros a year, I would not have believed that. Looking at the history of Insead, the school was raising 12 to 13 million euros per year during a campaign. So going now into this is absolutely unbelievable. Thanks to all of you who have been helping with this. But I think that to me the most important part of this is that we do feel that we're building this school together. And that's why we're having these results. Now we're still behind other schools, but now let's skip this. It is a bit depressing, I must admit. This is the percentage of revenue that is generated through philanthropic giving in the budget of Stanford GSB, 50%. Harvard is actually, it's a bit misleading because it includes Harvard Business School Publishing, their publishing house, which is about 200 million. So if you remove this, Harvard is also at 40%. What does it mean? We're at 7%. What does it mean? It means that they have more resources to give scholarships, to create knowledge. They have more resources to create facilities, more resources for innovation and so on. We're doing relatively well. I mean, again, we are one of the top schools in the world, and we are the best one. That's disputable. But I think that we can actually do even more. It is very important to keep engaged, to continue this sense of community. We're now here in Geneva. We've done already all these red things that you see there, but we're continuing with events in Sao Paulo, in New York, in San Francisco, in Paris, in Munich next year, and so on. So please make sure that you join us in this journey. So this is the last slide. Insead is a business school for the world. I used to get questions, not anymore. Why do you call yourself a business school for the world? You have campuses in 2 countries and 3 countries with the Abu Dhabi campus now, so on. And with San Francisco, 3.5. It's not where you have campuses. Our students are coming from 94 countries. Today, the MBA class has 94 nationalities. The map shows where we have alumni around the world. Nobody has anything even close to this. Nobody. So today, we are facing these huge challenges of how to transition from the old way of thinking about business into the new way. How to create the new business models, how to change norms. Norms change. Shareholder value maximization paradigm is a norm. It's not a physical law. It is not a biological law. It was created in order to answer a very simple question. You have a principal, the capital owner, and you have an agent, the CEO. How do I align the incentives that the principal has with the incentives that are given to the agent, the CEO? Michael Jensen wrote a bunch of papers in the 70s and the 80s, basically saying that the CEO has to maximize the value for the shareholder in order to align these incentives. But today, we're asking ourselves, is financial capital the only principle? In the process of production, use natural capital, use intellectual capital, use human capital. If I rewrite the problem under different assumptions, then actually the result might be very different. And again, we have a lot of work to do, but the important thing is that if we have now global challenges with all these societal issues that we see around the world, with all these outdated norms that we're trying to change, with all the environmental issues that we have, we need global answers. We need to address this in a global way. We need global solutions. So if not us, then who will do this? If it's not the Insead community that is spread all over the world, who else will step up and say, let's try to think about this, let's try to find a solution? And yesterday you heard that timing is everything. So if we don't do it now, then when? We may end up in a situation which is difficult to reverse. We may end up in a situation which actually will lead to a big deviation in terms of social peace. And then it will be too late. We may persist with norms that are outdated and are unfair. So we have to act today. Thank you.